board and say, welcome everyone to, this is facilitator call number 20. I've been I just did a quick track, and so 20 since a bit over a year ago. We started these in July last year, monthly, and then we kind of ramped them up to weekly. And then we had a break over the e-forum. And it was the e-forum that actually prompted this one. So after the e-forum keynote sessions, John Stantiall rang me up and said, Denise, we need to talk about this definition of extension. And I want to run a session. And so once the e-forum series finished, John rang me up again and said, Denise, let's organize this. So John, I'm going to hand it over to you. I'm in the background here running bits and pieces, so I'll follow your lead and just prompt. We've got an hour and a half set aside, but we'll just see how we're going for time. If we finish early, people will be happy with that. So.
All right, thank you, Denise. Thank you for setting this up and helping me to run it. So I'm basically going to just set up, I share my screen with a PowerPoint to use to lead us through it. So it's going to be pretty low key, and I'd be surprised if we use an hour and a half, to be fair. So, right, I'll just set this up and then share my screen, which my bar's disappeared now, so not quite working. Okay, so how's that going? Because I can't.
That's all good. Righty. We can see.
All right, here we go. So it still doesn't work quite so well. Right. Okay, so yeah, we got that's not running, is it? Like it should do. I'm going to start again, I think. Had it working before when I practiced.
It's always the way, John. But we're getting there. So we can see your file. Oh, yep. No, now we can see your.
Okay, now it's set up. Okay. So, all right. So the question that I've got and what I want to test with you today is agricultural extension adequately defined? So just to quickly through the agenda, welcome an introduction, do some revision of the existing definitions or groups of definitions. All right, see if we can identify what I think is the elephant in the room, but you might prove me wrong. Then we're going to test that theory, and then going to give you what I think could be a definition. And it actually, I think, changes the way that we think about the future of extension compared to some comments I've seen in the recent past. So, yeah, so thanks for joining me on this call. And I really want to thank RMPP for the commitment to a massive agriculture extension program in New Zealand. I think you'll agree with that. And also for training so many facilitators and for giving license and value to facilitation. I was always aware that a lot of what I did was facilitation, but I knew that previously it really hadn't been valued. And thank you for creating a community of facilitators and people passionate about agricultural extension. So I know this started as face-to-face workshops, but it's developed online and really allows us to interact with many more people with similar interests. For those of you who don't know me, my career started as a farm advisory officer in 1977 with the old Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. Being directly employed by the government was the ultimate in agriculture extension, perhaps not always the most effective, but I do remember living in the present and thinking how awesome it was to be able to do that job and not have to charge people to do it. In 1986, after Roger Douglas and co came in and I left maths, there was a few tough years. I ended up selling real estate for 5 years. 1993, I got a break and worked at Massey University for 2001. An interesting position which finished when I left there, was called the Agricultural Extension Coordinator. And this is where I was really determined to try and get my head around what agriculture extension was. And I developed these ideas way back then, but really sort of haven't found a forum to progress them since. So since 2001, I've been self-employed farm management consultant, working with individuals, undertaking farm systems, analytical work, facilitating farmer groups and facilitating industry good programs. So in 2018, I merged my business with Parent Ag, who are based in Rotorua. So today I'm taking a bit of a risk putting myself out there with my thoughts, but yeah, I'll look forward to getting your feedback. So I'm wanting to test my theory. Over the years, especially in the 90s when I worked at Massey, I've read a lot of international literature on agriculture extension and the chance to look at it a little bit now and again. And what I've seen, nothing's changed too much, but you might tell me differently. There might be something I'm missing. So I want to test the theory with the Zoom community, with you guys. I respect you as peers and being knowledgeable in this topic. So I'll do my best to facilitate through a brief process, and then I look forward to getting your feedback. So the challenge to me is that most definitions of extension, agriculture extension internationally, do not include a key stakeholder. Adding to this, there are many definitions which adds to the confusion. So thank you to the people for, I'll put that on there, for putting a definition on the Google Doc. And I think it's going to take a couple of minutes to perhaps have a bit of a chat about one or two of them and see if we can just get some little bit of discussion going before the next stage. So one of the things really I'm looking for is something that differentiates it from anything else, basically. So Brendan, you've put yours on there. Would you like to just read yours and explain what you think about it, please?
Sure, John. Look, I've put up there, I think extension, well, let me just caveat this to begin with. Look, I'm no expert in this space, that's for sure, and certainly, but through my time with being involved in RMPP and the Action Network, I've observed a lot, and for me, this sort of, in a succinct way, sums it up, that extension is about enabling and supporting change to occur on farm. There's probably one word that I thought about putting in there, but was trying to keep it short, was to support farmers in the change to occur on farm. Because I think the key point in around that is it's about enabling, it's about working with the farmers and being able to support them through the process of finding out about something, learning about it, and then actually getting the developing the confidence to do something about it.
Okay, cool, thank you. So is that different from what a consultant could do individually on an individual basis?
Yes, I'm not being specific around any particular form of extension, because there, as we've often talked about, there are different types of extension that need to occur to help support the farmer along that journey, right through to one-on-one advice and support as well. Yeah, absolutely. Okay,
cool.
I guess the key word there is support.
Okay, cool. Paul, would you like to just go through yours, please, for us and talk about it?
Just an apology. I'm operating off an iPhone on the side of the road and I can't see the doc. Could somebody just read out me what I said and I'll expand on it? Yeah,
sure. So turning information into on-farm action.
Yeah, so been involved in extension for a number of years, and I've seen quite a bit of development happen in the way that we actually deliver the information. So if you think back in the day, we started on chalk and talk, and we've now sort of come a long way, and there's a whole lot of other ways we pass that information on to farmers. But I still think, and it's always been the case, the key missing link is what happens when the farmer goes home. We haven't had a system or structure in place to actually actively support the farmer, turn that information into action back on his farm. There's a whole lot of reasons for that, but that to me is what I see the crux of agriculture extension right at the moment. If we could nail that one, we'd make leaps and bounds.
Okay, thanks, Paul. I mean, so one of the things is I don't disagree on any of these things that are written here. They're certainly all part of it. and there's probably some ongoing opportunities to have some discussion here, but I just want to try and keep focused on where I'm heading. So, Briar, would you like to just outline yours and some thoughts around it, please?
Thanks, John. Yeah, so the definition of extension that I like to use and a couple of my colleagues like to use is this Australian state and territory government definition from 2006, which is the extension is the process of enabling change in individuals, communities, and industries involved with primary industries and natural resources. So within that, there's a lot of different channels and ways you can connect with people and enable change. And it's not just about assisting farmers. You know, there's regional councils, those that have got land management advisors, they're part of the extension process. Sales, so sales reps to a certain extent fit into that extension. At Beef and Lamb, I guess we use remote personal extension, which is kind of social media. So that covers everything from emailing through to actual social media, so Facebook, online platforms. So there's more than one way of doing this stuff. It's, yeah, it fits a lot of that. You know, you could talk about it for hours, I guess. So it's hard to put it in a nutshell. I don't know quite where to start and where to stop.
Okay, alrighty, that's cool. So interesting comment there, sort of phrase, change in individuals. So that's something that sort of crops up from time to time and is a bit of a key, I think. So we can see that some of these definitions are sort of looking at the input side of it, and some perhaps looking at the output side of it, and some at the process. So, okay, if now I can't see the screens because I'm sharing my screen. So if anybody else would like to share theirs, perhaps put your hand up button, but Denise will have to tell me because I can't see all the screens.
No worries.
I'm happy to share mine, Denise, if you like. So
yeah, go. Awesome. Thank you.
So yeah, John, it's John King here.
Thanks, John.
And I've just put up there that, let me just flick back to what I've written there. For me, extension is developing independent learners, and they are farmers who question, think, and test solutions to improve quality of life. So, and that's come from a number of articles, I guess, I've written over the years on how extension's changed since the 1960s. Because basically, it's a little bit like Paul was talking about a minute ago. You know, and basically way back then, all we had was technology transfer. So the expert came along with their jug of knowledge and opened up, you know, the farmer's skull and poured that knowledge in, and everything was going to be hunky-dory. And then the next phase after that, you know, we found that would work for in some cases, but in a lot of cases it didn't work for the farmer because they weren't ready for that knowledge. And then after that came the next phase, which is the meeting clients' needs, which cynically is known as the con and consulting. So again, it starts with the consultant talking to the farmer, finding out what the farmer's problem is, going back to the research, getting the answer from the research, and then telling the farmer what to do. And so that's very similar in terms of that communication pattern to the technology transfer, where it's the researchers that have all the power in the development of the farmer. So that worked for a while, but it also had issues with, you know, not necessarily meeting what the farmer or the industry actually needed. And what's really interesting is that RMPP, the way that it's been developed, has actually moved on to the next stage, which is what I call developing independent learners, which is where the farmers are actually given the ability and the resources to take control of their learning. And the consultant then, or the consultant basically becomes the facilitator, which their role is essentially to find the resources that the farmers want, rather than including going and talking to the researchers, okay, rather than the researchers controlling the whole process. And so that's really how I see extension has changed. And that we started doing that last bit in the 90s, and it's followed or mimicked what's happening in adult education.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of similarity between, if you go and look at the world of adult education and look at the world of agricultural extension, you're going to see a lot of similarities in terms of how they've evolved over time. And so what I'm seeing is really how I see extension now is that my role as a facilitator is to find ways and means to develop confidence in farmers, because confidence is really everything in helping farmers change. If they have confidence in what they're doing, then they're more likely to give something a go.
Cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. There's a lot of different disciplines that come into this area. So you've probably filled it out a bit more than your definition you wrote there, but in some ways, you know, what's different from what you wrote to, say, tertiary education?
Well, because this is specifically to do with farmers rather than to do with tertiary education, but and tertiary education tends to be quite structured, whereas agricultural extension, the way that I see it, developing independent learners, is that the first thing you have to understand is the context of the farmer. We don't do that with context of the student in our tertiary institutions. The students are kind of herded in like a mob of sheep into a pen and then basically told what to do, okay? So, and you know, that works, okay? You know, it works, okay? So, but as you get older, this is you have to understand the age of the student, okay? So, whereas most farmers are not 18, 19 years of age. So they're in their 50s and they've got this thing called life experience, and that changes a lot of things about how they see the world. So, and their attitude towards you as a consultant as well. So that's what changes, is really the basically the life stage of the people that you're dealing with. They're not adolescents or just getting out of adolescence, you know. They've got that, and they've had that school of hard knocks to deal with as well. And as you'll be aware, that changes attitudes. So
cool.
That's how it works. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to make a brief comment. It's a little bit off track, but yeah, certainly in back in the 60s, 70s, talked about consulting, looking for problems and telling people how to solve them. These days, I think of my job really as looking for opportunities and being part of a farmer's on the farmer's management team. So certainly it's not a matter of telling people what to do, but being part of their teams. That's a little bit of a difference from those days as well. Okay, so what you've done quite nicely leads into my next slide, which is sort of the change over time, and these of the way we think about this stuff. So, in the definitions, so the target audience is usually quite well defined. So usually it says who we're wanting to change, or who's going to be improved, or who's going to be enabled. It's quite well defined, but they have implied subjects, like who's the doer of the action. So what I'd like you to do, Denise is going to put us into breakout rooms, and there's two questions. Who do you think initiated the action for these definitions, and who is performing the action? So, here we. Are you typing that,
All right.
Denise?
Yeah, so I'm just putting that into the chat box. So, who is? Can you repeat those? Sorry again, John.
Yep. So who do you think initiated the action? And who is performing the action?
Yep. Cool. So I'll just stop your sharing for the moment. I'm going to send you into some breakout rooms. If you can nominate someone just in your breakout room to capture a couple of your thoughts in the chat box, I'll get you to copy and paste that into the main chat box when we come back into the session, and so that way we can just have a little bit of a grab of what you talked about. So you've got 4 minutes in the room. Off you go. Now, Nikki, are you doing okay? Oh, yep. Great.
Oh, that doesn't last long, does it?
No, I know. I could give
Never
you more
does.
time.
And I didn't save my chat and I have to retype it.
Oh no. Hate that, Briar.
That's all right. So yeah, there's certainly see how we go. Would anyone have preferred that to have been a bit longer? Give us a thumbs up if you want a bit longer next time.
A little bit longer. Cool.
Yeah,
Can
okay,
do.
perhaps we will.
All right.
So, all right, thank you. All right, so now I did manage to capture that list. Thanks, Denise. Did that come up automatically, or did you put that list up? No, it didn't see it. So I've got a list of the names in each breakout room for some reason. I've never seen that before.
You have, because you're co-host, John, so you get special privileges.
Oh, okay, thank you. All righty.
So you know who's in which breakout room if you want to call on them. But if you have got something, if you were scribing, if you can just copy what you typed out in your breakout room chat and just recopy it, and that way it'll come into the main chat box. So if you do have a chance to do that. We have lost Nikki, who was on the call. She was trying to do too many things at once, so she apologizes. And Doug is also ducked off, but he will come back shortly. So yeah. Thank you, Briar. You've chucked something in there.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Am I still on sharing?
No, you're not on sharing. I've stopped your sharing, John.
Oh,
so
thank you.
need to
Yeah. So perhaps you must
Yep,
have managed
yep.
that, because it's hard for me to see. Right. Okay. So yeah. So Briar, perhaps since we've just had that little chat and you've put something in there, thank you. I'd like to just refresh your comments, please.
Yeah, so Ben and I were talking about how it depends on the context. So who initiates and performs can depend on where the pressure's coming from. So for an example, if we take Essential Freshwater, sorry, I've used an acronym, team, I know that's bad, that's coming from government level. So it's being initiated by government and farmers have to do. So the process is kind of enabled in between. Some of it will come from, some of the ingenuity will come from farmers and they'll enable the change themselves. Whereas if you take a action group that's farmer driven and the facilitator's enabling it for them. So it's completely different as to where the drive and where the actual performing is coming from.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Right. So Megan, would you like to comment on your comments here, please?
We were actually spent most of the time chatting about the weather, so we didn't get much in, but this is what this was Sarah's thoughts really, but we all agreed that at the start it was more us pushing and us doing the work and the legwork, but now that as action groups are formed, they understand or have more of an understanding of what extension actually is, and so can initiate that change a bit better.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Braden, got to go through your notes there, please, and what your group suggested.
Sure, it's probably mainly Brendan's, but we sort of did have a bit of discussion around it too, and I guess sharing wisdom and collaboration was kind of what came out of it all after a discussion, to actually have all the information flow and implementation on farm. I guess that was kind of what we got to for all the listed categories. But otherwise, farmers been enabled to perform any actions, so like having a support crew around them. I think was talked to before the breakout room. It used to be kind of told to the farmer earlier on, but now, even you said, John, it's more of a management. You're part of the management team. It's a bit more support sort of side of things rather than telling. Yeah. Anything else, Brendan and Tony?
No, I think you've covered it there, Braden. It's
cool. Thank
it's
you.
Two-way, basically a two-way street. If some things, what Briar said, some things will be pushed, but a lot of it will be farmers identifying their needs and gaps and pulling for information.
Okay, thank you. Leb, welcome along. I didn't catch up with you before, so would you like to just summarise yours? Yeah, just take yourself off mute, please. Or
Good idea. Yes. Apologies for being late. There were two basic themes to our conversation. One is that the definitions up there are describing what was, and still perhaps happens in some areas. So we kind of agree with what Braden said, but in the groups that we're operating, that it is farmer driven, and the farmers decide what they want to look at, and they decide who they're going to talk to, and the facilitator is merely just that, a facilitator. They enable it to happen. So that kind of summarises our things, I think. John and Sarah, was that the basis?
Just one thing I was going to add there, Lab, too, is that you know, I talked about the three things before, like tech transfer, meeting clients' needs, and independent learners. They're all good. The important thing there to notice is that they all have a place in the whole extension family of techniques. So nothing's worse or better than anything else. They're just different techniques to try and get some response from the farmer. So, and that's really that's what I just want to put across. Is it's just that there's been a progression over the years as we've, I guess, started to take more notice of the actual audience that we're working with. So. But you know, you still need technology transfer. It's, even though it's the most rudimentary of the lot. So just be mindful of that. That's all. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. And I think Dustin and the group that you guys, two of you there.
Or Meg, is it? Yeah.
Oh, do you want to talk to Meg?
Yeah, cool. Our conversation was actually very similar to Lab's comments. We were just talking about how those definitions still read as very top-down, and how we just need to make sure that we're doing the right things to make sure it's ground up, and how it's actually legitimately ground up and driven by the farmers, not just us telling ourselves and patting ourselves on the back that it's farmer-driven. You know, that we're asking the questions and facilitating that they are actually coming up with their own leads. We're not taking them to the answer and then making them think it's their idea.
Okay. All right. So I think, you know, all of those things are fantastic, and we could spend all day talking about those things. Those are the things that we're very involved with. And I think what I'm probably going to end up doing is just lifting it to a little bit different level, a bit bigger picture, really, is I guess what's in my mind. So thanks for that. That's awesome. So, right, I'm going to carry on and see if we can get to the next level. Now, I just need to sort out this technology again because I've got so many screens, it gets a bit tricky. Come back to...
Hopefully you can reshare.
Yeah, and it comes back in the right place, which will be interesting.
All good, no pressure. Yep, okay. We're seeing your... Yep, that's good.
Righto. Thank you. Now then, okay, so we've talked about definitions, existing definitions, and sort of what they mean. So just need to get my other page up. Right. So what do these themes have in common? So we've talked about that. We've talked about implied subjects. That's what we've just done. And to me, most of them, there's an inference of action between the extension agents and the target audience. So I'm saying that in the sort of the widest possible manner. And I think I mentioned before, sometimes defining process and sometimes high-level outcomes and sometimes input. Okay, but I still think that there's an elephant in the room, that there's something that's not mentioned in any of these definitions and is a pretty important stakeholder. Yeah, so this is taking it to a bit different level. It's not the interaction level, but it doesn't get mentioned, and I think it means we're missing out on our understanding of what we're actually involved with. So what I want you to do is just make a note in the chat box. If you're aware of any extension programs that exist without funding. Oh, actually, what I was going to do, you know, we were going to do a breakout room, weren't we, so Denise? Yes. So we're going to do a breakout room. And so the two questions are, what's the elephant in the room? And can you think of any extension programs that exist without funding?
Yep, any extension programs that exist.
So what's the stakeholder that's not mentioned in the definitions?
Cool, so I have mixed you up again just so that you get to talk to some different people. Yeah, again, if you can chuck just any little capture any chat in your breakout room chat box, and we'll copy and paste it into the main chat box at the end. So I'll give you 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So 5 minutes, 38, 43.
Funding. I'm not sure exactly if that would be included. So.
Because I mean, I can think of several social media pages that are like, you know, the New Zealand Orphan Lamb Rearing page.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? It's run by a farmer, and it's there's no cost to running it other than her time. Or there's several of them actually, and there's a number of community groups and things that are around that where they use them as information sharing hubs. They've got them for catchment groups, all that kind of stuff, and it's for sharing information and enabling their community. So that is a non-funded extension program, is it not?
Yeah, would we say it's just the unpaid connecting work? Is there's so much of that going on.
Oh, there's heaps.
Yeah. That's what I mean. Like that's the non-funded part, isn't it? Really,
yeah, and then do you think of? I mean, I guess a company would build it into their costing structure, but you take like Balance Agri-Nutrients. They've got their kind of extension teams and their sales reps. Yes, they're sales, but they also have an element of extension because they do a certain amount of education for kind of industry good.
Are they funded though? Call them funded.
Well, is that something that the business factors in, or is it something that they kind of do as an in-kind contribution to the industry? I'm not actually sure how that is calculated.
I kind of took it as similar to that actually, but more so the pro bono that isn't funded of like neighbours, you know, so support crew around them, you know, like that's, or even just pro bono other people, not necessarily neighbours, but other farmers.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So the elephant though, I was thinking maybe, I have no idea, but is it implementation actually on the ground change? Is that the elephant? I don't know. No ideas.
I like where you're going with it. Sorry, I'm just going to duck around and keep checking in on groups, but awesome stuff. Yeah.
Is the elephant that
I don't know, pre RNPP, I'm just not sure people saw the value in it, in the extension. So
does that come from ownership a little bit because we took the model upside down? Do you think that's come because you're a bit more engaged, where they think they've got more influence?
Yeah, I think so. But I think that they just didn't know what was out there that they could have, have value to. Like I think, we've had lots. We've had Tom Fraser. We've had oh God, I can't even think. The vet.
Trevor Cook.
Oh, yes. Yeah, mind blank. Trevor. We've had all sorts. And the first time we had Trevor, people were like, "Oh, I didn't even know we could get that kind of advice." They didn't even know where to look or where to go. And so I think they feel more empowered because they actually understand what's out there now, a lot more too. So yes, I think turning the model upside down, but also just them seeing, like going to the shop for the first time and you just actually find out what's in the shops,
Yeah, Sarah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and it's all about value, and it's how you support farmers understanding the value journey, because that takes various forms along the way. And I guess we're talking in the sense of groups, it's much easier. But I think if you're able to demonstrate and articulate or have value resonate with farmers, then the funding becomes less of an issue.
Which is a change from where you started, Brendan, really, wasn't it? Because you thought the elephant in the room was RMPP, or the funding model wasn't there.
No, what I think, and I probably have a little bit of insider intelligence, which suggests I think the elephant is what John's suggesting is that extension can't be performed without funding. Denise will nod her head probably.
Yep.
Yeah, it was obvious with the second leading question, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know if it's
good stuff.
I don't know where he's saying that needs to come from, but I think he's saying that it needs to be upfront.
Yeah.
For extension to occur. Whereas, I don't really agree with that. I think, as to Sarah's point, if you're able to start the journey around value, where are we starting from? What do we want? And actually testing along the way, are we getting there? Are we gaining? Are we benefiting? Are we getting values? And there'll be different levels of value. Then, and ultimately that will result in bottom line value on a farmer's books. And if you as a rural professional are able to take the farmer on that journey, then I believe funding becomes less of an issue. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be continuing in the way RNPP has to sort of support, grow more momentum in terms of, because I think that's the biggest opportunity, is how do we all get on the same page, what we were saying earlier, Tony, so that everyone's understanding the approach here and how we can collaborate and so that everyone's benefiting.
Good stuff. You've got a few more seconds. I'll see you back.
Can you extend that a bit, Denise?
Good stuff.
Right.
From the discussions that everyone wanted more time, John, still. So that's good.
Yeah, that was good. It was really helpful having that a little bit extra. So Lab got cut off unfortunately, but certainly agree with you there, Lab. That's part of, I think, the understanding of the whole system. So we'll come back to that shortly as well. All right.
Yeah, chuck in the chat box any comments, just copy and paste from what you're doing.
Yeah, so we get those rolling again, and because I'm sort of, oh no, I did have my list here somewhere, but it's disappeared on me. Right, so who's put something in there this time? No one yet. Okay, so all right, I'm probably gonna ask Lab then, because I'm not sure we got totally organised, to just perhaps a brief summary from our discussion, please.
Oh, that's going to be hard. We talked quite a lot about funding and who does the funding and what kind of funding exists. We also strayed a bit and we kind of came back to the point that we're really trying to talk about formal extension as opposed to informal extension. So John mentioned that extension happens on Facebook, and we talked about in the pub, and then Megan made the observation that there's more to funding than just money, that a lot of the resource that's used up by an extension is time. People give their time, and that's another part of the funding. But I think John was trying to push us to a higher place, and I'm not sure we actually got there. But we did start to talk about the various stakeholders that are in the whole extension industry, if we can call it that it's not just scientists and universities and institutions, and it's not just consultants, but there's a whole lot of other players in there. So I think probably that's about where we got to, John.
Cool, thank you. No, it's certainly identified the issues. So now I didn't capture my list this time, and it's disappeared, Denise. So do you know who was in the different groups, please?
Yes, so that was breakout room 4. So Braden, Briar and Dusty were in 3.
All right, so I think you all had a turn last time, didn't you? So who's volunteering to report back, please?
Yeah, so that's me. Yeah, I'm not sure if we were quite on the right track, but we definitely talked. Not sure, we still didn't quite figure out what the elephant in the room was, but we talked about there's just so many different ways of having forms of extension, and just finding that tipping point was for us the important thing around making a decision, having the confidence to make a decision on farm whether to change or whether to not change and stay with your current situation. So yeah, that was basically it.
Oh, we did talk a little bit about whether funding had to be from an organisation or whether it could be like farmer contribution, or the other thing was, I guess you just mentioned it, the formal or informal extension, and informal extension is very much an important part of extension. So things like Facebook pages, like if the Orphan Lamb Rearing Facebook page, the amount of information that people source off there's lots of catchment group pages where they're information sharing, that's just a time contribution. There's no funding. No organisation tried to set that up, and that's why it works.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Actually, before, just that connecting role, that unpaid informal connection, whether that's just over the fence with the farmer next door or with your real professional connecting you with someone that's going to help you and feed and water your ideas around certain topics or actions on farm.
Okay, thank you. So it's a huge area, isn't it? Sarah, please, thanks for putting a note on there, and you're muted still.
Yes, so I was with Brendan and Tony, and so we saw the elephant in the room, but we apparently had a bit of insider knowledge that funding was the elephant in the room, but we saw that as well, because when your next question was about what groups are funded. So, but yeah, so we agreed and disagreed, I think, as I've said in the group chat, that there is a need of some kind of funding, but not necessarily external, and that perhaps since REPP has been going, there is actually less of a need for external funding than there was before, because people are starting to understand that value that the facilitator and the group actually give them. But also we talked about the fact that they're also starting to see what else is out there. You know, some of them had never even had a farm consultant talk to them. So them starting to understand that there's farm consultants out there that they could use, or different industry professionals that they could ring up and talk to. So yeah, a lot of stuff that they kind of probably have been exposed to that they weren't before. That perhaps makes funding would make more groups possible, but that the existing ones don't necessarily need it.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Right. If I could add a little bit to that.
Tony's down the bottom. Yep. You're quite quiet, Tony.
Right, so if I could add a little bit more to that, I think that was the baby elephant in the room. I think the big elephant's still out in the hallway. Pre-election, is that probably because the funding came about ownership, and we've just seen with the fresh water policy and what's been handed down, is that maybe the elephant in the room is actually about New Zealand Incorporated and how the value comes from that and who should own that.
Okay, we can come back to that later if you like. Let's see how we go. Thanks for that, Tony. Right.
And one more room there, John, Ben, Meg, and Sarah.
Right, so who was reporting back, please?
We didn't agree on anybody in particular to report back, and nobody took any notes. But I mean, we were pretty slack. We did have a discussion though. I think one of the key things that Meg brought up was around, well, we kind of decided that no, there were no major extension programs that existed that weren't funded in some way, shape or form from the likes of a CRI or a levy organisation or something like that. But those that were what we were calling self-funded were groups where they expected to see almost immediate change on farms. So they could see the result and the impact of their investment quickly. And where they don't get to see that impact quickly, they're not as likely to invest into an extension program. So it was kind of around the value that they see. If it's long-term value and they can't quite see that return straight away, they're not as engaged in wanting to get involved in extension, but if they can see that return, you know, within a month or two or pretty quickly, then they're happy to spend that money. Otherwise, you're looking for funding from elsewhere, kind of thing. Anything that Meg or Ben, you want to add?
All right, cool, thank you. So yeah, so just briefly while we're on that, so eventually I'm going to come back and I'm going to be sort of seeing whether we can differentiate between extension and in professional or personal development, but I'm probably going to need to go to the next step now. I think I need to get back into my slideshow. And Denise, we're going to do this poll yet or not?
Yep, happy to do that. I can launch a poll.
Okay.
So yeah, I can launch it. So you've got a poll there. Can extension be achieved without funding? It is a yes or no choice.
Right, let's just see where you've...
And John, sorry, you're a co-host. You won't be able to vote.
Okay, that's fine.
Hopefully everyone can see the... Yep. Oh, yep, you're starting to vote. 8 of you. And a couple more to vote. You can do it.
14 less 2, 12.
12, yeah, yeah.
One to vote.
And sorry, Megan and Simon, you have to agree on a vote. That could be difficult.
Okay. So,
all right, okay, end polling. Hang on, here we go. Share results. Here you go, John.
Thank you. You know, I could see them anyway. So,
yep.
Yeah, so 9 people think that extension can be achieved without funding, and 3 don't. So, okay, so that's going to be an interesting discussion. All right, thanks for that, and I'll see if I can get back on organised here. Right. Okay, has that come up?
No, we're not seeing any shared screen yet, John.
No, okay, I need to do that first, don't I? My bar disappears. My.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, here we go. Rightio, has that happened yet? No.
No, share. Yep, there we go.
Okay. Alrighty, so we've done the poll and we've talked about that. So here we go. So this is the big picture that I see in terms of extension. Now, while we're doing this, if you do suddenly see things a little bit differently than what you're used to, you can perhaps if you have a light bulb moment, then perhaps just make a note in the chat box. Just see whether this really does help people see things differently or not. But the way that I've come to think of it is that extension is always initiated by somebody who wants to bring about a change in, we'll call them a target group. So this is quite generalized. It really can be applied to anything. Now, that initiator obviously needs to have some funding. It needs to have the authority or the mandate to do it. It could be a company that was marketing something, same principles. And the initiator wants change in this group, and they have objectives that they want, and it may be part of a legal or regulatory framework. So, you know, there's a number of policy tools that governments and bodies have, regulations, education, and then of course you've got, you know, fines and penalties and things. So really it's one of the tools that somebody has got to make change is to put, so that they want to make change. Typically they then employ somebody or contract somebody to make the change. So they provide the change agents, I've called this group in general, have a mandate, the policy, the resources, and they're given the objectives and the targets that they need to change. So for people involved in RMPP, it sort of become clear. It wasn't that clear right at the start. I had to do a lot of hunting around to find out exactly what the targets were that were expected. And then the change agents, decide how they're going to go about the job to achieve the changes that this group wants. So I'm just going to flip. Now, I've got some examples of how this might work. So up here, the initiators is a group. There's 7 there, 7 groups of change agents and 7 target groups. So we could start off, for example, Dairy New Zealand government, Fonterra, and that comes down to Dairy New Zealand staff, Fonterra staff, consultants, vets, have things that they want the dairy farmers to achieve. So these groups up here have things they want the dairy farmers to achieve, and they do it through these groups here. I'm going to skip down a couple to, the same principle applies as we've seen, it's been mentioned already, public, with fresh water, and they're targeting the farmers, and they haven't really said at this stage that they're going to pay anybody to help achieve that. But they're telling the regional councils that they have to give effect. So sort of there's a big implication, but no direct commitment there in terms of are they going to pay anybody to do it. You could think of through the government, they want drivers to drive more safely, and they use the police to help them with that. Regional councils have things that they need farmers to do, and they have their own staff, and sometimes they use consultants to do that and pay them to do some little bits of it. And again, the government wants people to stop smoking, and they use the health sector and advertising to help them achieve that. So to me, the thing fits in the big picture of change. It's change management. Now, we go one more step and we take out the funder, the initiator, the resources. So this is the test. Can the change agents bring about change in the target group without funding, and what mandate do they have? So, yeah, that's right. And so if funding's a prerequisite of agriculture extension, why does it not appear in any definitions? So, I might have skipped something here, but I'm just going to carry on. So my definition, it's pretty blunt. I haven't refined it. If anyone believes in it, it'll get refined over the years. But to me, extension is a situation involving at least 3 parties, whereby one party, the initiator or funder, wants to bring about a behavioural change in another party, the target audience, through a third party, the extension agents. Or it could be company representatives or salespeople who want people to buy the product. So same principles. So we're going to go into breakout rooms again and discuss the question that this definition, discuss this definition and list any questions that come up in your group, please. And to challenge me back, any reasons why you think this is not applicable. So any questions you've got of me to try and clarify this, and any reasons why you think it's not applicable?
I've just popped that into the chat box, John. So you should hopefully people can see that in the chat box.
Cool, thank you.
Otherwise, I hopefully have recreated the rooms, and I'm going to open those.
Cool, thank you.
You're good, Sarah? Yep.
People, I think they can be 2 different parties. You understand what I mean?
Yep, could be, and I'm not going to argue about that.
Yep, that's fine.
I'm really looking at the big picture, you know.
Yep. And the other thing I'd say is that it's probably to define that it has to be formal or non-formal. I mean, agricultural extension, because informal happens anyway, and that's automatically unfunded. So, because that's what happens between farmers at the pub. Okay, that's how I see that happening. Just
see, I wouldn't call that extension, John. I think that's the difference, to be honest. You know, that's just communication. That's just people talking.
But it still results in change, so I guess that's why I'd still call it extension, because...
And it can be professionals having those conversations, not just farmers with farmers. So, I mean, a non-formal thing might be a young farmer meeting at a pub. Okay, that might be more of a non-formal thing.
But you see, to me, there's not a third party wanting to bring about change in that group. They're just talking amongst themselves. It's just professional development. It's just personal development. I think the defining thing is that somebody else is wanting to bring about change.
Okay. Whereas I would say it's the farmers themselves that want to drive change.
That's just professional development. That happens all the time. It's like you and I on this meeting, just trying to, it's just professional development. So I think its extension is really somebody else is driving change in a third party.
Okay. Yep. I'll run with that. Okay, it's fine.
And you see, that's going to make a difference to a whole lot of ways we think about this. And this third party is just never part of the definition or the talk. And we just, it just changes. We keep talking about just us and the farmers, but if you don't include the funder or the initiator, then it's totally out of context, because we can't do it. I don't believe that we can do any extension without funding.
So it's implied in most of those models.
Yeah, it's true. It is implied.
But and then you hear things like, but we never get enough funding. Well, why don't you address and include the funding in your definition or in your So it's definitely, funding is definitely mentioned in the literature, but people always moan about not having enough, but it's never part of the definition.
But when you talk about an initiator, they don't necessarily have to be a funder. So, because you think about...
So you can get funding. So what I'm going to come to in a minute, I mean, now we've sort of got to this point, but somebody put RMPP together. Somebody put the Monitor Farm program together. And look, that could have been totally farmers.
Yes.
But once those farmers are putting that funding together, they think they can bring about change in a whole lot of other farmers. They become the top level. They become the initiator group. And they've got to go and find the funding from somewhere. So they found it from Beef and Lamb and MPI and the processing companies.
Yep. So that's fine. I mean, that's what I was meaning, is that the initiator and the funder can be two different bodies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah,
yes, I agree too. Yeah.
But they do have to come together and work together at some point, because they need to have common goals. Otherwise, that's not going to work.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, there's usually strings with funding. That's the whole drama.
That's right. There's always strings with funding.
But that's the thing, you see. And I'm going to show you in a minute, the article that I wrote in 2000 made exactly that point. Extension people always focused on the target audience, but in fact, we're actually getting paid by the funder.
Yeah, well, and I guess, if you look at the REEF program over in Australia, they've got all kinds of issues over there, because you've got a whole lot of funding, but lots of different initiators, and quite then confusing messages around what's the important thing to change. Anyway, sorry, I'm looking at the time, John. I'll need to just bring people back. Yep.
Okay. No, thank you, Denise, for your input. Thank you, John. Appreciate that.
We've still got 60 seconds, but I just need to close them. So it's let's capture that list. Sorry.
What I'll do, John, is I'll flick you through a paper that really helped me understand the relationships between adult education and agricultural extension. It was written in 1993 by Alan Rogers, and you might have come across Alan Rogers' work with teaching adults. And he was just comparing the two how they basically work side by side, or how they evolve side by side since the 60s.
Once you have this big picture definition that I'm promoting, all of those things fit in it. All those things.
Exactly right. Yeah. But it'll give you a bit more. It'll give you a bit more. Just add a bit more to what you've got. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, I did my master's in adult education and specifically in workshops. So it's partly what I do as well. But I remember in the 90s reading some stuff and
we were mid-sentence, weren't we, John?
Yeah, that's all right. That's right. Finished that up.
Apologies from Tony. He had to duck out, duck off. So we are just losing a couple of people, and we will keep an eye on the time there, John. So,
okay, thank you. So yeah, we're not far away from the end now, because I think we've done the big reveal and we've got into the discussion. So John King, unfortunately, didn't have not much option. John, can you please give a quick summary from our session?
Yeah, I think we were discussing around whether whether a funder and an initiator could be two different parties. So we focused a wee bit on that, and I think we came to an agreement that's possible, but not always the case, and that really and of course what we also spent a bit of time working about too was are we talking about informal or non-formal or formal extension, and had a discussion around that about what was informal, but we certainly did agree that formal and non-formal is most likely to get further ahead if it's got funding. So so that's really where we went from there. Was there anything else I missed there, John or Denise?
That's pretty much it. I just sort of differentiated a lot of what we call non-formal. I personally think is just professional development, people just learning and sharing information with each other. Because there's no third party involvement, no third parties wanting to change somebody, but I'll let the rest of the groups come first. So so Braden, Brendan and Megan, who's reporting back, please.
I think I was nominated.
Okay.
So I guess originally I personally sort of thought it's quite well worded for the historical model, but I guess looking forward, I was kind of thinking of the freshwater essentials as an example. I feel like that's still quite well worded, but it's maybe not having the implementation and actually, having everyone have the same view is not necessarily mentioned there. So I mean, I feel like that's kind of the picture really, rather than the historical, where it's one person here is wanting this to change, but they might not necessarily put themselves in the shoes of that party that needs to change. So yeah, I kind of got to there. Kind of said maybe that needs to be sort of added into that final part, because not necessarily a salesperson or those sort of people will be able to, I guess, put themselves in their farmer's shoes and do that. Yeah. Anything else, Megan?
Yeah, I guess just in terms of a statement that summarises extension, it defines part of extension, but probably doesn't represent the broader extension landscape.
Okay, all right. So that'll be an interesting conversation. So and we have to remember that regulations don't necessarily imply extension. So, regulations can be regulations without having that the governments and authorities want change. They don't have to put extension programs in place. They just say, if you don't do it, we're going to fine you. So we just got to differentiate these things, Is somebody putting the resources in to bring about change, or are they just basically setting the rules and without providing that extension resource? So, so Brian, Dustin and Sarah, who's reporting, please.
So that's me for this one. So yeah, we discussed this, and our final thoughts were in line with what Brendan said, which was we think that the statement is a pathway of extension. It's a branch of the tree, but it doesn't define extension. So we felt that there was more options, in beef and lamb's case, often we would only have two parties in that statement. We wouldn't necessarily have a third one. So I think it just yeah, it's an approach as opposed to a definition for us.
Cool. It's a good challenge. So which two parties would you have in there?
Beef and lamb and farmer in most cases, or sorry, facilitator, farmer.
Okay. So facilitator and a farmer you'd have. And what's the facilitator wanting to do?
Provide information to the farmer, but it's not, we don't make, the farmer has to make the change themselves. We can't force a change, and we're not trying to force a change. We just have a role of providing information and tools.
Okay, so the farmer wants some information and somebody can provide it. So wouldn't that just be professional development? Somebody's just wanting to learn and grow?
I guess so. So I guess for us then, we're a professional development program as opposed to an extension team and program.
Oh, absolutely. And that's, I think, you know, that's one of the, you know, in my mind, I think there's a difference, but I'm challenging you on this. And so Ben, where did you end up in this, mate? Did you end up in a group?
Yeah. So I was just sort of put my view out there that it sort of depends on whether it's going to be who's initiating it. You know, if it's top down, if you know government good bodies are initiating it, or if farmers are initiating it. You know, in many cases with action groups, you know, if groups are looking at production, profitability, sustainability stuff, then it's the farmers that are wanting to improve themselves, and they're actually initiating that. And in most cases, if farmers are wanting to stay at the cutting edge, I said, and not at the bleeding edge of these things, then they're going to be willing to fund it themselves. And what's people said before in the previous forum, you know, that's, I actually forgot what they've said now, but sorry. Yeah, do you want to elaborate a wee bit more? Whoever was
I took some notes, Ben.
Yeah.
And you said if they want to be at the cutting edge instead of the bleeding edge, they will pay. And then someone chipped in with said, and if they can make more money out of something, they see it as an investment. Then they'll be happy to pay for it. So I've got some notes here. So our group kind of came down to two kind of things really, that farmers will pay when they're motivated, you know, themselves. If they can see a value in it, they will help pay for it. And in fact, there was an example that some catchment groups actually started without funding, even though there was a government directed to improve the environment. There was no funding at that point, but they started them. Some farmer groups started catchment groups by themselves. And for traditional extension, where farmers are seen as pawns, where you're trying to generate a specific change, that model of John's is appropriate. So if it's a third party driven change directive, or they want to try and drive a change, then that's a great model. But there is a kind of a separate system, if you like, I'm seeing now, is that where farmers will self-fund and they will generate their own continuing professional development. I'm not sure if this is what John was driving at. And I was going to say to our group, to me, this describes extension beautifully, and a lot of other activities that are happening in the space aren't actually what I would call extension at all. They're something, we need to find a new name for this. It's evolved from extension, but it's changed. And so there's, you know, we call it innovation or innovation generation or something like that, but it's different from extension. So did I miss anything out, group? Sorry, I drifted on to what I was going to say a little.
Okay. All happy? All right.
Yeah, sorry. And John, Bryce just chucked in there, question is peer-to-peer learning professional development or part of extension? And yeah, I think that's really the crossover bit, isn't it? So great question, Brian.
Yeah, cool. So when you look at the big picture, so what's happened, let's see, can I get back on track? I don't think I've quite got this written in there. You see, once you get the big picture, there's so much that does fit in. All those things do fit into extension. So RMPP provided the opportunity to farmers to do their own professional development. They provided the opportunity for facilitators and for the expert speakers. And so what they've done, so if I can just set this back up, and I didn't point out the funding, because they changed the traditional funding model, and you may have picked that up on my slide, which I now have to.
Yeah, if you can reshare. We were
back,
seeing.
yeah, sorry. And okay, if I just go back to the diagram. I don't know why this has to go line by line on this thing. It's really annoying. So the traditional model that I mentioned is that the initiator or the employs their change agents to do the job. RMPP went the other way around, and they allocated the funding to the target group to choose their facilitator and choose their how they went about it. Now, the objective was still the same. The RMPP's goal was for farmers to improve their EFS by $117 per hectare by 2025, whatever it was. So there was a specific target, but they basically let them choose the way they went about it. So it still doesn't actually, you know, it doesn't negate the definition that I've developed. So does anyone want to just comment on that? No. So you see that really this applies at a big level. So we mentioned before, there was a bit of talk about people like fertilizer companies, seed companies have representatives in the field, and there was some talk about the confusion of different people out there doing similar stuff. That the reality is that the companies that employ representatives in the field want to bring about change. They want farmers and whoever, the consumers, to buy their products. They'll often put representatives in the field when what they see as market failure in terms of the consumer having difficulty in choosing or understanding the product. So it's still part of the same thing, but we come together at ground level, and how do we work with these people who was put like they're in our space, but are part of the same picture really. Okay, I'm just going to quickly finish this off because time's gone way faster than I thought. Okay, so we've done, I think we've been through that, but so I did an article in 2000 in the APN magazine, and I said then about you had an organisation that was wanted a desired situation, employs extension agents, they use their knowledge and skills, and there's a program to implement, and then there's monitor and there's feedback to basically, I didn't put it there so much as the funder, but that's what I was talking about. So it's not like it's just a new idea for me, and I have tested it out a fair bit over the time. So where to now, and I think, you know, we got some comments in some of those meetings earlier on, and like things like there was more disruption coming. Well, I mean, extension's always existed amongst disruption. That's probably why it's there in the first place, because there's disruption. And look, people have said in a lot of different ways that basically it's looking to hit people over the head with a heavier hammer, you know, like there's different ways of, you just yell louder or something. So that was again focused on the agent and target audience interaction, figuring out how we work with others in our space. So that's valid, but we have to remember how they're in our space and why they're in our space, and more measuring and monitoring. Now, okay, so what I'm going to do is, before I bring up the next bit, I'm trying to rerun that poll and see if anybody's changed their mind. So Denise, could you just rerun that poll for me, please?
Yes, sorry, I just need to stop your sharing, I think. So I'm going to launch the second poll, exactly the same as the first. So have people changed? Okay, still a couple of you to vote.
Oh, we've got a few less people this time. That's going to...
Yes, it's true. 2 more people, if you get the chance to vote. 1 more. Oh, we're changing a little bit, slightly. 1 more person who hasn't voted. I can't tell, so it is anonymous.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. All right, let's share those results.
Okay, we got a couple who swung, so that's
swinging voters.
Okay, alrighty. So just it's so it's part of a conversation. Thanks for that. Right, see if I can get this back up and running again and just finish off because right. So are we back on now?
Yep, we're all right. Thanks, John.
Cool. So the next thing. So it really, this allows us to change the way we think about it. Instead of thinking about the interactions, we need to be looking at the much bigger picture. So the future of extension, and it really always has been this, but we haven't been thinking about it explicitly like this. The opportunities in the future really are about identifying needs about identifying opportunities that exist. So in our case, in the farming community, and identifying potential funders and putting the package together, basically like RMPP did, and back in the day, Monitor Farm program. So, it just lifts their whole thinking, I think, from a different level, from the interaction level to the big picture level. And you've already talked about, essential fresh water is one example, and here's another one, just when I did this a couple of months ago, like the government wants to accelerate improvements to production and sustainability. Well, isn't that an extension opportunity? So you go and talk to the government, you want this to happen, we know how to make it happen, you give us the money. So that's the future of extension, not yelling louder at somebody with a different story, I think. And yeah, this whole thing is a little, you've heard me already, I think farmer-led learning is an oxymoron. I call that professional development. However, if a group of farmers put some funding together and puts a program together, then they become that top level initiator, because they think they can change that all the other farmers need changing, and that's what they're looking to do. So to me, if there's no funding by a third party, there's no agricultural extension. And let's talk about it the other way around. Without funding, agricultural extensionists are redundant. So I'll hand it over to you guys. That's pretty much the formal bit. I'll stop sharing so we can have a final chat before we wind up. So put your hand up if you want to say something. Or
unmute, you'll be fine. Go, John.
Yeah, John, I think what you're talking about there is essentially, at the end of the day, control. Who has control of the message? And so if you've got the purse strings, then you've got control of the message. That's essentially what you're talking about there, I think.
It's one way of looking at it. It's not the way I was thinking of it. I was thinking of it in a more constructive way, but you're absolutely correct, of course. That's always been the case. That doesn't change, hasn't changed.
No. So, yeah, because there's kind of like, 3 ways of engaging people. There's first they turn up, the second one is get them to participate, and the third is have them control of what the information that they want to be introduced to. And so that's another way of looking at extension as well from that perspective in terms of how the interaction happens. Yeah.
Okay. So then quickly, does anyone disagree that if there's if there's no funding, then you're redundant? Does anyone disagree?
I still disagree with it. Sorry, I would strongly stand on the other side, because I think that extension is the process of enabling change. And I think there's so many methods, and before you mentioned personal development, but to me, personal development is a mechanism for enabling change. So therefore it's part of extension. It is an extension itself. And I think like your model is it's a branch of extension, but it doesn't define extension. It's like, the two-party thing. It's say if we provide a resource and farmers come and find that, do we then class that as personal development, which is an extension? So why did we create the resource, kind of thing? I'm still saying it's more about enabling change as opposed to a model.
So I mean that's a question, isn't it? Why did you provide the resource? What do you want to? Why do you want it to change? Something to change?
I don't think that we think that farmers have to change. I don't think that farmers have to do what we say in all our 500 resources. That's just there if they want information, and some of it's different, and some of it's opinions of other farmers, and peer-to-peer learning is important as well. And like I said in that question before, does that become personal development if we're trying to get farmers to learn off each other?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Lab.
Just a quickie. I kind of think we're actually agreeing on a lot of stuff, but not agreeing, if you know what I mean. We're kind of coming at it from different perspectives, but we are agreeing. And I'd just like to make the comment that, yes, extension, if you want to define it as enabling change, then it's everything we do with farmers, really. But it's depending on whether it's change that's driven by an outside organisation like the government or Beef and Lamb or somebody like that, or whether the change is driven by the farmers themselves. So we don't know what changes they want to make. We only know what changes as a government or as an organisation, we only know what changes we would like them to make. But if we just say to them, like RMPP have, be more profitable, who's going to disagree with that? We don't know what they have to change to be more profitable. They decide that. We just say, we're going to help you. So that's my comments anyway.
Yeah, so, and I disagree again, because that's, agree, not disagree, because that enables innovation. Whereas if we if we have it as a model, it means that the message is coming top down, and then we don't see maybe a really great innovation that's happening somewhere in response to a government change or something, and then are able to then extend that further for farmers for the better benefit.
Mm.
So when the funder wants something that easily aligns with the target audience goals, then it's easy. I mean, back in the day, the Ministry of Agriculture wanted increased production from farmland, from farmers. And so that's what we did, not too different to RMPP now. We just went around it. So the government employed us in those days to go out and work one-on-one or with groups. There was no brief, really. We made up our own brief as we went along. So now, if you have a situation where, the government wants something that's not so aligned with farmer goals, like fresh water, then, the government still wants change, but it's not such a pleasant space to be in as an extension agent.
Yeah, and sorry, John, I'm just looking at time, but Sarah and Brendan both have a quick comment each, so yeah.
I just had a bit of a light bulb moment too, that that model of extension which you talk about in your definition is actually not a very cost effective one. So, well, in my opinion, because when I look at RMPP, out of three groups I had, probably 1.5 of those groups will continue on and really were worth created noticeable on-farm change, and 1.5 of those groups probably didn't change anything on their farm. So it's all very well to say that you're going to lead it from the top and we're going to teach these people, but the people actually still want to have to want to change and want to be better. And that's where I think where our MPPs come to is it's almost a culture change, and they are leading it from the bottom, but that's also far more cost effective because the money that's getting spent is actually creating a higher change ratio. So yeah,
that's cool.
Okay. Thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, quickly. Look, I agree with Briar, Lab, and what you just said there, Sarah, as well. And I think to the point around those resources that get developed as well, a lot of those are farmer requested or identified as being needs for farmers, so they get developed for them to use. But I guess my point here is that we're operating with multiple players that are coming at things with multiple purposes and reasons, and there's government and there's organisations, and it's so complex in that respect that it's really hard to define it. And I think one of the key elements here in terms of identifying the appropriate focuses and programs or workshops or resources, funding is about connection and being connected and understanding what's going on and having a culture within the sector where people are understanding of the needs and the approaches that actually work for farmers, and them allowing them to work together and be facilitated to enable that change to occur, I think is the big thing. So being connected is really at the heart of effective sector collaboration, I believe.
All right, thanks, Brendan. Okay, if we're aware of the time, moving on, need to wrap it up. Obviously, some of us are going to agree to disagree, but I think eventually you'll come to realise that that there's a big picture there, that not much works without that big picture, and you can focus on bits of it, but really, and look, there's still a whole lot of stuff that still would be useful to talk about. I mean, in terms of effectiveness, we can still come back and talk about, you know, the interaction part of it, but I just think that if you ignore the funder, then you're really not talking about extension one way or another, or you're just missing the part of it that actually is pretty key stakeholder. So I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, Denise, for setting this up and helping with it, and thank you everybody for your participation. And yeah, I'm not sure there's this easy forum to continue this discussion apart from coming back, but if anyone's got any thoughts, feel free to contact me directly.
So John, it's okay if I email round your slides to everyone on this call?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep. So what I'll do is I'll email everyone just later today as a follow-up with a bit of an outline from what's been on the chat and John's slides. And please follow up and keep it going. But thank you so much. It's been a really good conversation, isn't it, digging into this? So appreciate your time, everybody. Thanks, John, too, for organising it and thinking through it.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Thanks,
See you later. All the best.